Hi, True Crime family. Today we're back with another case, and this time we are headed to South Korea. One thing that South Korea prides itself on and is known for is its low crime rate. But now, just because a country has a low crime rate does not mean that brutal crimes do not happen. In 2012, a young, bloody, bruised 8-year-old girl fought to stay alive as she crawled out of a church bathroom into the streets. Passers-by and parents of other young children were shocked to see how badly hurt this young girl was and called the police. Once the ambulance had arrived, the young girl, who was identified as Naeongi, kept going in and out of consciousness and mental confusion. And the only thing that she was able to say was her name and her father's number. Part of her cheeks were hanging off, her organs were coming out from the bottom of her body, and she was completely bloody and bruised. The young girl was holding on for dear life. Now, the police got in contact with her parents, and her father had arrived to the hospital. The father tried talking to her. He was shocked, he was crying, he was hysteric, but Naeongi could not answer him. All she could say at that point was that the bad man needed to be caught. Now, the doctors then took her to surgery. It was an 8-hour surgery, and they were saying how by the time they got to actually look at Naeongi, her intestines, her organs, they were black. At this point, it wasn't that how they can save the organs. It was more of removal and seeing what was left over and what medical devices or bags now needed to be placed on this 8-year-old. Now, the police on the scene at this church bathroom started gathering evidence. There was semen fluid, there was blood, there was fingerprints, there was a lot of DNA. They had sent all this DNA and evidence to get examined. There was a positive match to 56-year-old ex-convict Cho Doo Soon. So they brought him in, but Mr. Chu, he just outright denied it. I did not do it. How can you say that? I'm not a monster that would do this to an 8-year-old. Now, slowly, he started saying bits and pieces of, okay, like, fine, I've done it, but I was drunk. I was drinking from the night before. Now, the reason why he went on this I was drunk is because there is a law in Korea that states that there will be a reduced sentence if a criminal is drunk and they do something. They can enact this law and get a reduced sentence. The maximum amount, if this law is enacted, is 15 years of prison. So now, Mr. Chu, instead of getting lifetime in prison, he was trying to aim for 15 or less years. According to the police, fingerprints, bodily fluids, all this evidence and DNA that they found on the scene wasn't enough to convict him, so they had to bring in the young girl and get her to testify. Now, this is when things got disgusting and the police were criticized across the country. You would think that the police would have some decency and ask her questions about what happened in private, but instead, they asked her in front of everyone to identify her assailant and tell them in detail from A to Z what exactly happened. This 8-year-old girl had to relive everything, not just once, not just twice. For hours, she had to tell the exact same story again and again, only because the police couldn't figure out what was wrong with the recording equipment. Sometimes it wouldn't work. Sometimes it didn't turn on. Sometimes it was all these excuses of how they were not able to successfully record the testimony. So the poor girl had to relive the entire scene from A to Z again and again and again. And then the police had the audacity to say, well, this testimony isn't good enough. You're going to have to come into court and identify him while he's there and tell everyone there also. Now, Chu was taken into custody and questioned, but his lawyers kept pushing one thing, that he was drunk and that is why it happened, and how he is a good man, and his wife even testified that he is a good man, and it's just under the influence of alcohol, he turned into this. Now, he has a history of being violent. He has a history of being arrested. Now, there was the incident where Cho and another man were both drunk and got into a fight at a bar, and Cho had killed this man. But because both of them were drunk, that rule or law got enacted. And even though, yes, he had murdered him, but because he was drunk, both of them were drunk, he only got 1 year sentence. He did end up describing what happened that day. At first, he said that he didn't remember at all what happened that day. But then slowly he did say, well, he wasn't looking for trouble. He just saw her and it just happened. Now, disclaimer, we are now going to be talking about what happened that day. And how did an 8-year-old girl get taken during the day by a grown man? Nayeongi was on her way to school that morning. Usually her mom walks her to school, but that morning her mom was busy, so she had sent Nayeongi on her own. Now, in Korea, it's kind of normal for young children by the age of 6 to walk themselves to school since it is a safe country. And even though her parents were kind of hesitating in the beginning, they thought to themselves, well, the school's only 3 minutes away. She should be fine. Like, there's other kids and parents of the neighborhood also walking down there. Like, she should be okay. That is when Cho saw her walking down the street, and he forced her to come with him and took her to a washroom in a local church. There he tried to force himself into her mouth, but she obviously did not want that. She tried pushing, she tried screaming, and he hit her and bit her cheek so hard that it was practically coming off, like the doctors were describing, and knocked her unconscious and repeatedly forced himself onto her. Not just her private parts, but also her ears. She was so badly damaged that her organs were coming out of her body, and for some odd reason, he thought shoving the organs back into her body and then forcing her to sit up would prevent the organs from coming out again. And then he continued to assault her. After he was done, he left the water running in hopes that the evidence would wash away. He tried drowning her also in the cold water, and he pushed a toilet plunger inside of her in hopes of getting rid of his DNA. Now, you would think all this happened for hours, but in reality, it happened within 30 minutes. When Cho left the scene, he believed that she was dead and that he wouldn't be caught. But somehow, she regained consciousness and crawled into the open, and that is when the neighbors saw her and called emergency services. Once the public, especially the neighbors, saw this case, people were livid. And they were scared. No one wanted to send their children alone anymore. This safe country that they grew up in and loved was not so safe. But what made people even more angry was how the investigators handled the case. How they made Nayeongi describe what she went through for hours in front of people and not considered how she's feeling and her physical health, her mental health. They just did not care. Now, the family later on did sue them for mishandling the investigation, which they won, but we don't know if the family got any money or if they got any money or what came out of that. Now, the assailant Cho, because of that law that Koreans are now trying to abolish, only got 15 years, but later on he did appeal and it got reduced to 12 years. During the trial, everything got brought up again. And one question that they asked Nayeongi was, did you smell alcohol on Cho? Now, Nayeongi, she's 8, she's innocent, she's a fighter. She told the truth and said yes. She didn't realize that her telling the truth is going to let her assailant have a reduced sentence. So instead of having lifetime or even 15 years, he got 12 years. All because alcohol made him mentally and physically weak. And in what world does that make any sense? So according to this law, all the drunkards of Korea can commit crime left, right, and center, and the courts will be lenient on them. How is that right? Now, the people do know that this is wrong, and there are groups that are trying to abolish this law. Now, the courts try to reassure the family and the public that when he does get released, he will be under strict probation, including wearing a GPS-enabled electronic monitor, which he has to wear for 7 years, and there will be extra security cameras, and there will be random check-ins with the assailant also when he is released, and there will be extra security cameras across the neighborhood, and there will be this police officer who will randomly check in on him. And what makes matters worse is that he lived walking distance from Naeungi. They lived in the same area. But what can the family do? The family wasn't well off. Like, they couldn't just pick up and leave. They did not have the money. Like, it costs money. And the father said, "I don't know how to express in words how we feel. Should we move? Why should the victim have to pack and run? Isn't it our reality that the offender is protected in the name of human rights and the victim has to go into hiding?" It's true. What did Naeungi do? Nothing. She did absolutely nothing. She's a fighter. She's a strong girl. But this man, this disgusting human of a monster, is protected by law? Now, the police did say that when Chu is released, his address and real name will be released for safety reasons. He won't have an officer with him, but an officer will be monitoring him 24/7 and will make random visits to his home. Also, a 1-kilometer radius around his home will be a woman's safety zone. There will be an increased police patrol around that area, post guards, and install over 71 surveillance cameras around 23 areas. So this incident happened in 2012, and Chu was released from prison in December 2020. He's out. He is walking a free man right now in Korea. Whereas Naeungi, she's in her early 20s. She is now a level 3 disability, and she has to live with the mental and physical scars for the rest of her life. In January 2021, a month after being released, Chu and his wife applied for basic livelihood grants and pension for senior citizens. When people found out that they were seeking benefits, people went to the presidential office's official website demanding the government not to give them the welfare allowances. Now, in Korea, those who are 65 or over can receive a monthly pension of 300,000 won, which is around $275. Citizens whose income is less than 30% of the median income are eligible for basic livelihood security program benefits, which includes living expenses, allowances for housing and medical care. According to 2021 welfare guidelines, a 2-person household whose income is roughly less than 900,000 won a month are eligible for benefits. They can receive up to 1.2 million won per month, which Chu and his wife are getting. So in total, they're receiving 1.2 million won per month, which is around $1,080. There were teenagers and young adults going around Chu's home once the address was released and filming it, putting it on YouTube, and people were outraged. The victim's family were outraged. They were saying, like, why are you guys using this as publicity now when we needed you? We needed the voices of what you have back then. In 2012, no one stood up for us. No one helped us. But now, because it's going to get you views on YouTube and harassing our neighborhood, making our daughter and our family live through this again. Also, Chu was attacked by a man in his 20s pretending to be an officer. And like others, he believed that Chu's sentence was too lenient. In 2012, a movie was made out of this heartbreaking incident, and it was called Hope. Eventually, after Chu was released, the victim and her family did move out of that area and they moved to an undisclosed neighborhood. It just sucks because it's like, why is it the victim that always has to accommodate? Why does she first have to suffer mentally and physically and now uproot her entire life because of this man? Now that is the case of Nayeongi. Let me know your thoughts below. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And until next time, bye.